I woke to the soft, steady beeping of machines and the whisper of rain against the glass, the kind of February rain Oregon keeps just for itself. Thin, relentless, and patient. The guest wing of our house had been stripped of personality and turned into a small clinic. Stainless steel carts, the faint sting of antiseptic, a monitor that drew my pulse in green light. Somewhere down the hall, a door clicked, hesitant, as if it were trying not to be heard. I didn't move. It's easier to learn the truth when people think you're asleep. Caleb's voice carried first, low, flat at the edges the way it gets when he's trying to hold a line. Another voice answered, a man's, the syllables careful, professional. I caught only pieces, the way words drift through a doorway and break apart. Platelets, refractory, 3 to 4 weeks at most, unless the pause stretched, unless there's a miracle. The word fell into the quiet like a coin into deep water and kept falling. It wasn't the first time I'd heard it, but this time it sounded like a verdict. I stared at the ceiling and counted my breaths, 4 in, 6 out, pretending I was the one in control. It's a game the sick play with themselves. Control the breath, control the tremor in your hands, control the way your thoughts swarm when a stranger places a time limit on your life. The room smelled faintly of rosemary from a new shampoo the night nurse had left on the windowsill. Someone's small kindness, and under it the clean, metallic scent of saline. The rain tapped harder. Footsteps came closer. I closed my eyes a second too late. The door opened. Light thinned through my lashes. Caleb stopped beside the bed and did what he always does when he thinks I'm asleep. He touched my hair like it might shatter, then my wrist, counting the beats he could already see on the monitor. His palm felt colder than the room. "Hey," he whispered to the air more than to me. "I'm here." He was always here and yet not. The company followed him like weather, emails, calls, board members who said his name with their own plans baked into it. Lately, their voices had grown sharper. Lately, everything had. He dragged the chair closer. The scrape of its feet on the wood made me want to apologize for the floor. I kept my breathing even. There was a time when I filled silence for both of us, when I came home with stories from the lab, when science felt like a clean, bright language we both spoke. Now, sentences arrived in fragments. Side effects, markers, decline, words that didn't mean anything until they did. "They're wrong," he said after a while, so quietly I almost missed it. "They have to be." The bed hummed, some subtle adjustment as the compressor shifted. The house clicked and settled the way old houses do in the rain. I wanted to tell him I didn't need a miracle. I needed a morning without the taste of metal in my mouth. I needed one ordinary walk to the kitchen without the half-flight turning into a mountain. I needed him to stop looking at me like I was a problem he couldn't solve. I wasn't sure what I needed. Maybe that was the point. Somewhere in the hallway, a phone vibrated against wood. He didn't answer. He stayed, counting, watching, as if vigilance itself could hold me in place. In the darker hours, I have learned to inventory small things because small things still belong to me. The damp curl of hair at my temple, the sting at the foresight that fades if I breathe through it, the rain's tempo shifting from quick to slow, like a metronome changing its mind, the faint citrus on Caleb's cuff because he forgot to rinse the cutting board after slicing an orange before he came up here, the way the air moves when he stands, even before he stands, the way he hesitates at the door, a man arguing with an empty room. "Tomorrow," he said finally, to the window or to me or to himself. "We try something else tomorrow." He clicked the lamp off. The hall swallowed him. His footsteps, 3, then 2, then none, disappeared into the house. When the quiet returned, it felt heavier, like it knew more than it wanted to say. I opened my eyes. Out beyond the glass, the firs were black strokes against a sky the color of slate, the valley below layered in damp, silver air. Our life used to be meetings and flights and calendar blocks. 2 people who believed in data and the clean certainty of results. We planned years and numbers. We quantified hope. Now strangers came into our home and adjusted my hope with their hands. 3 to 4 weeks, the voice had said. I pressed my lips together and tasted the sweetness of the rosemary shampoo. I could almost laugh at that, my body failing its scale, and here I was cataloging a fragrance note like a line in a paper. But the brain keeps what it can. It keeps rain. It keeps the lamp's soft circle cooling on the wall. It keeps your husband's hand cold and careful around your wrist. It keeps a sentence broken in half and the part after the pause. Unless the monitor ticked on. I turned my head a fraction and watched the green line climb and fall. Climb and fall. A little more effort in each peak than yesterday. Not a miracle. A graph. I have always trusted graphs. I let my eyes close again and pictured the space behind them. The dark shape of the valley, the ridgeline, the thin path you take when you can't see the end but you walk anyway. Tomorrow, he said. The word sat where I could reach it. I held it in my mouth like a small stone and waited for sleep to find me. And if it didn't, I would count the rain and the seconds between the beeps and the breath going in and the breath coming out, because tonight I was still here. Tonight, I could hear the storm and name it. Tonight, the sentence had an unless, and that was enough to turn the door's soft click into a promise. By morning, the rain had thinned to a mist that clung to the glass like it couldn't quite let go. I drifted in and out of shallow dreams, the kind where your mind keeps replaying the same sound. Footsteps in a hallway, the shuffle of papers. But each time you turn the corner to see who's there, you wake instead. The nurse came and went, her movements soft and practiced, as if she'd trained herself to be invisible. She adjusted the 4-line, checked the monitor, left without asking questions I couldn't answer. I heard Caleb's voice again before I saw him. It was sharper now, stripped of the low reassurance he'd used last night. I don't care about the optics, Robert, he said somewhere near the front of the house. She's not a contract, she's my wife. That makes her my priority. The reply was muffled, a man's tone clipped with the kind of patience that's really irritation in a suit. I didn't need to hear the words to know the shape of the conversation. They'd been circling the same battlefield for weeks. The company, the board, the quiet suggestion that if I was going to die, he should at least die with his position intact. When he finally came in, he'd smoothed his voice back into something calm, but his jaw betrayed him. He tried to smile. "Morning," he said, leaning down to brush his lips against my temple. His breath carried the faint scent of black coffee. "How are you feeling?" It was the question people ask when they don't really want the answer. I told him the truth anyway, like I'm watching the tide go out. His eyes tightened for a second. "We'll change that," he said, too quickly, like a promise he'd already decided how to keep. He pulled a chair closer, sat, so our knees almost touched. "Elena, I'm going to be gone for most of the day." My chest sank a little at that. "Where?" "There's someone I need to see." He hesitated, as if debating how much to tell me. "A woman in the valley. She helps people when medicine runs out of options." My instinct rose before my logic could catch it. "A healer?" I could hear the skepticism in my own voice. We'd built our lives on evidence, on peer-reviewed studies and trials with clean control groups. Folk remedies were for stories told around wood stoves. He didn't flinch. "She's helped others. I read about her. I think she can help you." My throat tightened, not from illness, but from the weight of what it meant for him to leave the structure he trusted, to reach for something he couldn't quantify. He took my hand. "I'm not ready to let you go." The way he said it, steady, quiet, without the heroic edge people put on dramatic declarations, made it harder to breathe. I closed my eyes, picturing the long road that cut through the valley, the way the fog pooled in its dips. "Caleb!" I started, but he was already standing, already tucking the blanket closer around me, as if fortifying the walls before stepping into the storm. "Rest," he said. "I'll be back before the rain." I listened to the sound of his footsteps retreating, the low murmur of his voice at the front door, the muffled thud as it closed behind him. The house fell quiet again, except for the pulse of my own heart in my ears and the faint, persistent hiss of the mist against the glass. I turned my head toward the window and tried to picture the woman he was going to find, and whether she would look at me and see something worth saving, or just another name for the ledger of the almost gone. The mist thickened as the day slipped by, turning the view outside into a watercolor of grays and greens. I drifted in and out, lulled by the hum of the oxygen concentrator and the occasional creak of the old beams overhead. At some point, I heard the tires on the gravel drive. Slow, deliberate, as if whoever was behind the wheel didn't belong here and knew it. The front door opened. Voices, Caleb's lower than usual, and another I didn't recognize, soft, but edged with something that felt like certainty. A moment later, footsteps approached, unhurried but purposeful. When the door to my room swung open, the air seemed to change with it. She stepped inside without hesitation. Tall, silver hair woven into a braid, threaded with dried flowers. Eyes the pale blue of winter sky just before snow. Her dress was the color of deep water, embroidered along the hem in patterns I didn't recognize but felt older than the room itself. She smelled faintly of cedar and something sweet I couldn't place. For a moment, I thought the air around her might actually be warmer. "Elena," she said, not a question, not a guess. My name sat in her mouth, like she'd been carrying it for years. I glanced at Caleb, but he was watching her, not me, as if trying to read her the way he reads a complex chart. "I'm Velma Ashwood," she continued, coming closer until she stood at the side of the bed. "You've been walking a thin path for a long time." Her gaze held mine, steady, unblinking. I felt the urge to look away, as if she might find something in me I hadn't yet decided to give. Her hand was cool when it touched mine, but the coolness was soothing, like the shade of a tree on a fevered afternoon. Then she placed her other hand lightly on my abdomen. The touch was gentle but deliberate, as though she were listening with her skin. Her brow softened. "There is another heartbeat here," she said quietly. "Small but strong." For a moment, the words didn't make sense, just a series of sounds strung together. Then meaning crashed over me. Another heartbeat. My mind snagged on all the things I'd been told, after the chemo, after the surgeries. Words like never and impossible. I looked to Caleb. His eyes had gone wide, his breath caught halfway between disbelief and hope. "That's not," my voice faltered. "That can't be." Velma's expression didn't change. "It is. Your body is fighting for more than just you now." She drew her hand back, resting it lightly over mine again. "But you are both in danger, and the choice ahead will not be easy." A choice. The word landed with the weight of something that might break me, even more than the illness had. Caleb stepped closer, his hand finding my shoulder. "If there's a way to save both," Velma's gaze shifted to him, "it can be tried, but it will take everything she has and everything you can give her." I didn't look at him. My eyes stayed on hers. "Then we try." My voice surprised me, steady without the tremor I felt inside. I didn't need time to think. Somewhere beneath the fear, something new had taken root, small but unyielding. If there was another life inside me, even a fragile one, I would not choose to abandon it. Velma nodded once, as if she'd expected nothing else. "Then we begin." The mist outside pressed harder against the glass, blurring the line between the valley and the sky. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel like I was the one fading. Something in me, someone in me was pushing back, and I was ready to push with it. Night came early, folding itself over the house until the only light in my room was the low amber glow from the lamp in the corner. Velma had gone to prepare what's needed, her words, not mine. Caleb lingered at the edge of the bed, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees, like he was afraid if he stood, something would shift that couldn't be shifted back. Neither of us spoke for a while. The only sounds were the slow tick of the clock on the wall and the faint sigh of wind moving through the fir trees outside. I watched him the way you watch a photograph, knowing it can't look back at you. He looked older than he had even this morning. Shoulders tense, shadows deep under his eyes. I keep thinking about what she said, I murmured, my voice quiet enough that the room almost kept it for itself. He straightened. About the baby? I nodded. The words still felt too delicate to speak out loud. Caleb, we've been told over and over that it wasn't possible. I stopped letting myself think about it years ago. My fingers twisted in the blanket. And now, if she's right, if this is real, his hand found mine, warm this time, his thumb brushing over my knuckles. Then it changes everything. It changes nothing, I said quickly, surprising us both. I'm still sick. You're still fighting the board. We're still here, waiting to see which breaks first, my body or your company. The corner of his mouth twitched, almost a smile, but not quite. Then we hold both together. I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe that holding on was enough. But in the quiet, I could still feel the unspoken, the risk Velma hadn't dressed up in hopeful language, the reality that saving one life might cost the other. Before I could say more, a soft knock came at the door. Velma stepped inside, carrying a small bundle wrapped in deep green cloth. She moved like the light around her bent to let her pass. Setting the bundle on the bedside table, she unwrapped it to reveal small pouches of dried herbs, glass jars of amber liquid, and something that looked like polished river stones. We start tonight, she said simply. Your body is tired. It needs to remember what strength feels like before it can share it. She glanced at Caleb. You'll help. He stood, no hesitation. Velma poured something dark and fragrant into a ceramic bowl, steam curling upward with the scent of earth after rain. Breathe this, she instructed, holding it near. Let it settle in you. Don't force it. Let it find its way. The first breath was strange, sharp, bitter, almost metallic. But then it softened, and a warmth spread through my chest. My eyelids felt heavier, but not in the way of exhaustion. More like sinking into a warm lake. Velma's voice came from somewhere, just above me. This is not about defeating the sickness. It's about remembering that you are more than it. Caleb's hand was at my back, steady, as if anchoring me to the bed and to him. I closed my eyes, let the warmth drift further in, and thought of the second heartbeat Velma claimed to have heard. I didn't know if it was strong or fragile, real or imagined. But I knew one thing. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't bracing myself for the next wave to pull me under. I was holding on to something, and it was holding back. By the next morning, the house felt different. I couldn't explain why. Nothing visible had changed. The same filtered light spilled through the curtains. The same faint hum of the equipment kept time with my breathing. The same scent of rosemary and antiseptic lingered in the air. But there was a stillness I hadn't felt in weeks, a sense that something was waiting. Velma came in just after sunrise, her hair loose now, silver waves falling over her shoulders. She moved to the window and opened it halfway. Cold air swept in, edged with the smell of damp earth and cedar. The room needs to breathe, she said, as though it were as alive as I was. She carried over a steaming mug and set it on the nightstand. The surface of the liquid was a deep, reddish-brown, flecked with bits of leaf and bark. Sip slowly. It will taste bitter. It did. The flavor clung to my tongue like dark chocolate gone wrong. But as it slid down, it left behind a surprising warmth, not just in my throat, but in my fingers, my toes. Caleb appeared in the doorway a few minutes later, his hair damp from the shower, shirt sleeves rolled up. How is she? Velma didn't turn. Stronger than yesterday. His eyes flicked to me. You look different. I wanted to ask better or worse, but I held the words back. Instead, I said, I feel here. More here than I did yesterday. Velma glanced at me then, her eyes narrowing like she was confirming something. That's the beginning. But we have to keep the rhythm steady. No sudden movements. No shocks to the system. As if on cue, footsteps echoed in the hall. Sharp, measured, unmistakable. Eleanor. Even before she appeared, I could picture her. Spine straight, chin lifted, eyes scanning the room like a judge entering her courtroom. She swept in wearing a tailored coat, the kind you wear even indoors to make a point. Her gaze landed on me first, softening just enough to pass for concern. Then she saw Velma and froze. For a heartbeat, neither spoke. Then Eleanor said very slowly, "I know you." Velma didn't flinch. "We've met, though it's been many years." Eleanor took a step closer, studying her face as if searching for proof in the lines time had left. "You're the woman who came for my mother. The one everyone said was a story she made up." "I'm not a story," Velma said quietly. Eleanor's lips parted, but no words came. I watched her carefully. This was a woman who never lost her footing, yet something in her posture shifted, as though the ground beneath her had tilted. Caleb looked between them. "You've met before?" Neither answered him directly. Velma's gaze stayed on Eleanor. "Your family has called on me before, and now it calls again. 3 generations, always for the same thing. Life when it seems impossible." I felt the chill from the open window deepen, though the morning sun was rising outside. For the first time, I wondered if my place in this house, this family, was part of something bigger than choice or chance. Eleanor's eyes flicked to me, unreadable. "If you're here for her, then do what you came to do." She turned sharply and left the room, her heels striking the floor like punctuation marks. Velma closed the window halfway, muting the cold, and looked at me. "The circle tightens," she murmured. "We keep moving." I didn't know what that meant exactly, but I could feel it, the tightening, the way the air seemed to coil, waiting for what came next. And for the first time in days, I wasn't afraid of what that might be. The days that followed blurred into a pattern, each one stitched together by Velma's quiet rituals and Caleb's steady presence. Mornings began with the bitter tea, afternoons with a slow walk, if you could call it that, from the bed to the armchair by the window. Velma said the change of view mattered. That light carried its own medicine. I didn't argue. The valley outside was shifting with the season. The firs stayed dark, but the maples along the slope had traded their bare branches for tight buds, hints of green that would open if the weather held. I found myself watching them, almost willing them forward. If they could turn toward spring, maybe I could, too. Sometimes Velma would work in silence, grinding herbs or warming oil, the rhythmic scrape and swirl of her hands filling the room with a scent that was both earthy and sharp. Other times, she hummed under her breath, low, unhurried melodies that seemed to pull my thoughts into calmer waters. Caleb joined in when she asked, learning how to press along the arches of my feet or trace the lines of my palms with oil that smelled faintly of citrus and pine. One afternoon, as he worked, I caught him looking at me not with worry, but with something like recognition, like he'd found the part of me that had been slipping away and was holding on to it. But outside the walls of that room, the world didn't wait. I knew it from the way Caleb's phone would vibrate on the nightstand, from the short, clipped conversations he took in the hallway. He didn't bring the details in, but I could read the lines in his face. The board was restless. The company he'd built, the one that had paid for every treatment I'd had, was becoming a battlefield. That night, when Velma left to let me rest, I asked him, "How bad is it?" He didn't pretend not to know what I meant. Bad enough that they think taking me out will fix it. And will it? His mouth tightened. It'll make it worse. But they're not interested in worse. They're interested in control. I thought about that as the room went quiet again, about how sickness takes control first of your body, then of your choices, and how, in its own way, the company was doing the same to him. Velma returned just before midnight with a small pouch, the kind she always wore around her neck. She placed it under my pillow without explanation. "Tonight," she said, "you dream for both of you." When the light was out and Caleb's breathing had settled beside me, I closed my eyes and waited. I didn't know what I was supposed to dream, but somewhere between waking and sleep, I felt it, faint and steady, like a knock on the other side of a wall. I laid my hand over my abdomen and stayed very still, and the knock came again. I woke before dawn, the sky outside still deep and colorless. Caleb was asleep in the chair beside the bed, head tipped back, his hand resting loosely on my blanket, as if even in sleep he refused to let go. The pouch Velma had placed under my pillow was warm to the touch, though I was certain it hadn't been near any source of heat. I slipped it into my palm and held it there, curious. The faint scent of cedar and something sharper, juniper, maybe, rose from the fabric. For a moment, I wondered if I'd imagined the heartbeat in the night, if it had been nothing more than the mind grasping at hope. But then I remembered the way it had pulsed against the quiet, unhurried and certain, like it belonged here. Velma appeared in the doorway as if she'd been waiting for me to wake. "You felt it," she said, not a question. "Yes," I whispered. She nodded once, stepping into the room. "That's the thread we follow. The child will fight, but only if you keep your end of the cord strong." Caleb stirred then, blinking at the light creeping in around the curtains. "What's happening?" Velma didn't look at him. The beginning of the second path. She set a small clay bowl on the table, its surface painted with a pattern I didn't recognize. "Today will be harder. She will tire quickly. You stay close." "I'm not leaving," Caleb said, the edge in his voice more vow than defense. By mid-morning, the harder part became clear. Velma guided me through a slow sequence of movements, nothing dramatic, but each one felt heavier than it should have, rolling my shoulders, lifting my arms, turning my head. It wasn't pain that slowed me, but the sense that every gesture carried weight from somewhere else. "Don't force it," she reminded. "Let the body open at its own pace. If you tear the thread, we start again from nothing." I caught Caleb watching me, his jaw set. I knew that look. It was the one he wore when something inside him was breaking, but he refused to show it. By late afternoon, the clouds had thickened, turning the windows into mirrors. I was sitting by the fire when the crunch of tires on gravel cut through the quiet. Caleb rose quickly, glancing at Velma. She didn't move, only tilted her head as if listening to something far off. Moments later, the front door opened and Eleanor swept in, coat unbuttoned, a thin line of wind following her. But she wasn't alone. A man in a tailored suit stepped in behind her, carrying a leather briefcase polished enough to reflect the firelight. "Mitchell Hargrove," Eleanor announced, her tone clipped. "He's here to discuss the company's future." Caleb's shoulders went rigid. "This isn't the time." "It's exactly the time," Mitchell said smoothly, his eyes sliding over to me with a glance that was polite but distant. "We all have a stake in what happens next." Velma's gaze sharpened, though she didn't speak. I could feel the air in the room change again, thicker, heavier, as if the conversation about to unfold would decide more than just the fate of a company. And for the first time, I wondered if my fight to survive and Caleb's fight to keep control were part of the same battle. Mitchell didn't sit right away. He lingered by the fire, warming his hands as though he had all the time in the world. His presence was deliberate, measured movements, voice low and smooth, the kind of man who never raised his tone because he didn't need to. People leaned in to hear him. "I'll be direct," he began, finally turning toward Caleb. "The board is unsettled. They've lost confidence. They believe your personal situation is compromising your judgment." Caleb didn't move, but the heat in his eyes said enough. "My personal situation has nothing to do with the company's stability." "That's not how they see it," Mitchell replied, his gaze flicking briefly toward me, as if I were a liability on paper rather than a person in the room. "They're looking for a transition. Quiet, clean, and quick." Eleanor, still standing near the door, said nothing, but the way she clasped her gloves together told me she was not an impartial observer. Caleb's jaw tightened, And you? Where do you stand? Mitchell gave a faint smile. I stand where the company survives. He opened the briefcase, removing a thin stack of papers. Sign this, and you retain a symbolic role. They'll handle the rest. You can devote your time to family matters. Velma moved then, slow and deliberate, placing herself between the fire and Mitchell's shadow. You bring this into my space, she asked, her voice low but cutting. This isn't your concern, Mitchell said flatly. It is, Velma countered, when the sickness you're feeding tries to take root here. Something in his expression faltered, just for a second, before the practiced calm returned. He set the papers on the mantel. Consider it. The longer you wait, the harder it will be to salvage anything. Caleb didn't answer. Mitchell took the silence as dismissal, snapping the briefcase shut and heading for the door. Eleanor followed him out, her heels clicking against the floor like a metronome marking the tension he left behind. When the door closed, Velma turned to Caleb. You can't fight for both at once. One will take the other down. His eyes met mine, the weight of the choice pressing into the space between us. I felt it too, that impossible pull to save everything, knowing something would have to be lost. Later, when Velma had gone and the house was quiet again, Caleb sat beside me, his elbows on his knees. If I let them take it, they'll use it for everything we built it to fight against. I reached for his hand. And if you don't? His gaze drifted to the fire, the flames catching in his eyes. Then we both have to make it out alive. There was no promise in his voice, no false comfort, just the truth and the faintest thread of determination. The same thread I felt in myself, tightening with every breath. That night, the wind rose hard against the house, rattling the old panes in their frames. I couldn't sleep. Caleb was in the chair again, his head bowed over his clasped hands, the fire reduced to a faint glow. The papers Mitchell had left were still on the mantel, untouched. Velma came in just before midnight, a wool shawl draped over her shoulders. She didn't speak at first, only poured a dark liquid into a small cup and handed it to me. Tonight, you need to go deeper, she said. There are things inside you still holding back. I drank, the taste sharp enough to make my eyes water. Heat rolled through my chest, then spread outward, until I felt as though I could hear my own heartbeat in my fingertips. Velma pulled a chair closer to the bed. Tell me, she said softly, what is it you're afraid to see? The question hit harder than the drink. Images flickered through my mind, sterile hospital rooms, the sound of monitors flatlining, Caleb's voice over the phone telling me don't give up, and the endless, grinding days when giving up had seemed like the only honest option. I'm afraid, I said slowly, that even if I survive this, I won't be the same, that the woman he married is already gone. Velma didn't look away. Then you stop trying to be her. You become someone else, someone who doesn't need to be carried. Her words settled into me, heavy but warm. I realized I'd been clinging to the idea of going back, when maybe the way forward meant becoming something unrecognizable to the woman who had first walked into this house. The fire popped, a log shifting. Caleb lifted his head. You're not gone, he said quietly. You're here. That's all that matters. I wanted to believe him, but outside, the wind roared harder, as if reminding me that being here was only part of the fight. By morning, the storm had passed, leaving the valley scrubbed clean. The light through the windows was sharp and cold, revealing every detail, the fine lines around Caleb's eyes, the faint trace of green returning to the hillside, the single set of tire tracks winding away from the house. Velma came in carrying a basket of dried herbs. Today, she said, we take you out. Caleb frowned. Out where? To the water, Velma answered. It's time she remembers what strength feels like when it's moving. I didn't know if I was ready, but something in the way she said it made me swing my legs over the side of the bed, my feet finding the floor as if they'd been waiting for this moment. The air outside hit me like a living thing, cold, damp, threaded with the scent of moss and river stone. Caleb kept a steady arm at my back as we followed Velma down the narrow path behind the house, the earth soft underfoot from the night storm. Every step was deliberate, my body remembering movement in pieces, like a song I'd once known but had to hum slowly to recall. The sound of the river reached us before we saw it, low and constant, like a voice that had been speaking long before we arrived. When we stepped out of the trees, the water stretched wide and fast, its surface flashing in the pale morning light. Velma stopped at the edge, laying her basket on a flat rock. She pulled out a length of fabric, deep green, frayed at the ends, and dipped it into the current. "The river holds strength because it never stops moving," she said. "We borrow some today." Caleb's grip on my arm tightened as Velma motioned for me to step closer. The riverbank was slick, the rocks cold beneath my shoes. Velma wrapped the wet fabric around my wrists, the chill biting instantly into my skin. "Breathe," she instructed. "Let the cold tell your blood to wake." I closed my eyes. The shock of the water faded into something else, an ache, then a thrum, and finally a strange steadiness. I could feel the beat of my heart pushing against the fabric, matching the pull of the river. When I opened my eyes again, Caleb was watching me with an expression I hadn't seen in weeks. Not fear, not worry, but something like recognition. As if he saw the woman who used to walk with him along this same bank in summers past. Velma unwound the cloth, wringing it out over the current before tucking it back into her basket. "That's enough for today. Too much, and you'll take more than you can hold." On the way back, the air felt different in my lungs, fuller, easier. My steps were still slow, but they were mine. When the house came into view, a black sedan was parked in the drive. Eleanor stood beside it, speaking to a man I didn't recognize. His suit was too fine for the mud beneath his shoes, his expression too polite to be genuine. Caleb's pace slowed. "That's not board business," he muttered. Velma's eyes narrowed as we drew closer. "No," she said quietly. "That's something older than the board." I didn't understand what she meant, but as the man's gaze shifted to me, I felt it, that same tightening in the air like the moment before a storm breaks. The man stepped forward before we reached the porch, extending a hand that neither Caleb nor I moved to take. His smile was measured, the kind that revealed nothing. "Mrs. Moore," he said, his tone smooth as polished stone. "I'm Samuel Greer. I represent certain interests connected to your late father's estate." The words landed strangely. "My father's estate has been settled for years," I replied, glancing at Caleb. "That's what you were told," Greer said, eyes steady on mine. "But there are assets, substantial ones, that never went through probate. Assets certain people are now trying very hard to make disappear." Caleb's stance shifted, just slightly, but I felt it in the air between us. "Why come here?" he asked. Greer's gaze flicked toward Eleanor, who was standing stiffly beside the sedan. "Because others might prefer your wife doesn't hear the truth while she's still in a position to claim it." Velma's voice cut in from behind us, low and sharp. "You bring shadows into this house and think they won't stain the floor." Greer didn't flinch. "I'm offering her a chance to protect what's hers, but it won't be hers for long." Something in my chest tightened, not just from his words, but from the way Eleanor avoided my eyes. Memories I'd buried, half-heard arguments, letters my mother never let me read, pressed against the edges of my mind. Caleb stepped between us. "You'll leave your contact information. We'll be in touch." Greer reached into his coat, producing a slim envelope. He placed it on the porch railing, then inclined his head. "Don't wait too long. Some things vanish quietly without a trace." He turned, sliding into the sedan without another word. The car's tires hissed over the wet gravel, carrying him away until the sound faded into the hum of the river. Inside, Caleb closed the door and locked it, though no one said they felt safer. Velma studied Eleanor for a long moment before speaking. You knew this was coming. Eleanor's mouth pressed into a thin line. I knew pieces of it, enough to understand that if she digs, she'll find things better left buried. Her eyes met mine, cool and deliberate, and you may not like what you find. But the thing about surviving something that should have broken you is that fear changes shape. It doesn't vanish, it sharpens. And in that moment, I knew I'd rather face whatever was hidden than let someone else decide what parts of my life I was allowed to keep. That night, sleep came in fragments. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the envelope on the railing. Greer's calm warning looping in my head. By dawn, I'd stopped trying to rest. Caleb was already up, pacing near the window. The sky outside washed pale with early light. I think you should call him, I said. He turned, surprise flashing across his face. You don't even know what's in that envelope. I know enough, I answered, and I'm tired of everyone else deciding what I should be told. Velma appeared in the doorway, a steaming mug in her hands. She's right, she said simply. A closed door is still a door. Caleb hesitated, then reached for the envelope on the table. Inside was a single card, Greer's name, a phone number, and nothing else. The simplicity made it feel heavier, as if the rest of the story was too dangerous to put in writing. By noon, we were in his car, the valley stretching wide around us as we followed the winding road into town. Greer had agreed to meet in a small cafe near the courthouse. He was already there when we arrived, seated at a corner table, a leather folder resting beside his coffee. You came, he said, as if there'd never been any doubt. Tell us everything, I said, sitting opposite him. He opened the folder, sliding a stack of yellowed documents toward me. Your father's family owned land, hundreds of acres, in the hills outside Corvallis. Timber rights, mineral rights, water rights. Most of it was quietly transferred after his death, through shell companies tied to people your mother trusted. My stomach turned. And Eleanor? Greer's mouth tightened. Some of those companies connect back to the Moors. Not directly to her, but close enough. Caleb's jaw set like stone. If this is true, we can fight it. Greer nodded. You can, but the fight will draw everyone into the light. Friends, family, enemies. Once it starts, there's no stepping back. I looked at the papers, at the neat signatures and shifting corporate names, each one a small theft. Somewhere deep inside, a pulse of resolve took shape. I've already lost too much, I said quietly. I'm not losing what's left just because they think I won't fight. Greer slid the folder fully across the table. Then you'll need more than me. You'll need someone who knows how they move, someone they can't see coming. His eyes flicked toward Caleb. Do you have anyone like that? Caleb didn't answer right away, but I could see the name forming in his mind, and from the way his expression shifted, I knew it was someone who could change everything. Caleb waited until we were back in the car before speaking the name out loud. Daniel Walker. I frowned. Who is he? A man who doesn't owe the Moors a damn thing, Caleb said, eyes fixed on the road. He used to work in acquisitions, saw how people like them hide assets, how they bury trails so deep the law can't touch them. But he walked away years ago. Moved out near the coast, keeps to himself. Velma, who had insisted on coming with us, spoke from the back seat. And why would he help you now? Caleb glanced at me in the rear-view mirror. Because once, a long time ago, I kept him from losing everything. He told me if I ever needed to call in that favor, I'd know when the time came. We drove for hours, the landscape changing from the quiet folds of the valley to the salt-stained edges of the Pacific. The air grew sharper, carrying the tang of the ocean long before we saw the water. Daniel's place was set back from the road, a weathered cabin facing the cliffs. He was on the porch when we pulled up, a tall man with wind-burned skin and eyes that seemed to measure everything in silence before deciding whether it mattered. Caleb, he said, voice rough as gravel, didn't think I'd see you again. You remember what you told me, Caleb replied. That day in Portland. Daniel's gaze shifted to me, then to Velma, then back to Caleb. Looks like you've stepped into something big. Caleb didn't sugarcoat it. He told him about Greer, the land, the companies, Eleanor's shadow in the background. Daniel listened without interruption, his expression unreadable. When Caleb finished, Daniel leaned against the porch rail. You're talking about a fight that won't end in court. People like that, they don't just give up. They close ranks. They erase you. I'm aware, Caleb said. Daniel's eyes settled on me. And you? You're ready for that. I held his stare. I've already been erased once. This time, I decide what gets written back. For a moment, the wind was the only sound. Then Daniel nodded slowly. All right, but if we do this, you'll have to walk through some ugly truths. About them, and maybe about your own family. The chill in the air deepened, but inside I felt something burn steady. A quiet, defiant heat. Because whatever those truths were, I was done being the last to know. Daniel didn't waste time. Inside his cabin, maps were spread across a long work table, their edges weighted down with smooth stones. Some showed the coastline, others the deep green sprawl of Oregon's interior, marked with neat red circles. These, he said, tapping the circles, are parcels that used to belong to your father's family. Most were sold under questionable circumstances, transferred through holding companies registered out of state. Follow the money far enough, and you'll find the same 5 or 6 names popping up. Caleb leaned over the table, and the Moores are connected. Daniel's mouth curved without humor. Indirectly, they're careful. The trick is catching the moment they move something, because in that moment they're vulnerable. I traced a finger over one of the circles. So how do we catch them? Daniel's eyes met mine. We make them think they've already won, that you're walking away. People who think they've secured their victory get sloppy. Velma crossed her arms. You're talking about baiting them. Exactly, Daniel said. You disappear for a while. Let them believe you're broken, ready to settle for whatever they offer. In the meantime, I dig. And when I find the leverage we need, you come back swinging. Caleb looked at me, waiting for my reaction. I thought about Greer's warning, about Eleanor's cool gaze on the porch. They already believed I wouldn't fight. Maybe the most dangerous thing I could do was let them believe it a little longer. I can do that, I said finally. But when we come back, we don't stop halfway. Daniel nodded once, the decision sealed. Then we start now. You'll need to leave tonight. Go somewhere they can't track you. No calls, no emails, no paper trail. I'll reach out when I'm ready. The gravity of it settled over me, but it didn't feel like fear. It felt like stepping into the river that morning. Cold, shocking, and then steady. As the sun dipped low, we stood on the cliff behind Daniel's cabin, the Pacific stretching out in a restless expanse. Caleb's hand found mine, warm against the bite of the wind. They won't see you coming, he said quietly. And for the first time in a long while, I believed him.